Hello, my name is Matt Frenchman and I'm the CEO of Sugar. We're a financing platform for game studios to scale up their games. Today I'm going to be talking to you about top tips for building a successful studio. I hope the Ukie Access to Finance event has been really useful so far. Hopefully I can give you some good things to think about in this presentation, and then there'll be some great stuff to follow as well. Before I go into the meat of the presentation, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of Sugar, why we exist and how we can help, and then I'll go on to talk about top tips for building a successful studio. So we are a business that provides capital finance to all sorts of game studios, no matter what platform you're on, and we help give you the capital to grow and scale up. We do this using loans, and we do this so that you don't have to give away equity in your business, so that you can find ways to finance your business and scale up without worrying about all the other things that go with fundraising. The solutions that we offer, we have three core products. The first one is Sugar Boost, which is effectively a marketing loan. So it's finance to help you scale up your game once you've gone live. We use data and we are integrated fully into the game's ecosystem, and that's how we make our decisions. And that is seamless and very easy to onboard. It takes only 24 hours to get you going with our finance. Secondly, we have a product called Sugar Flow. This is effectively giving you access to your store revenues early. So whether you generate money at Google or Apple or Facebook or PlayStation or Steam, you don't actually receive those revenues directly or immediately. You have to wait till the stores to pay out. But once they've been purchased, or once the revenues sit there, we give you that money immediately. And the third product we have is Sugar Cap, which is access to your video games tax relief early. I'll talk a little bit more about VGTR later on, but it's effectively a rebate from the government based on the amount you spend making your game. It can take 3 to 6 months. It's a bit of a process to go through, but it's a great initiative from the government. And what we do is we analyze the data and we just give you the money immediately. So what happens is we effectively give you finance month after month. So you come to us needing finance and support and money to grow your business. We analyze the data depending on which product, that could be different. We provide you with the finance with the minimum amount of hassle, and we give you funding month after month, and hopefully your revenues go up and up and up. Now I'm going to move into the key piece of the presentation, which hopefully will add some value to you, and just talk about some of the pieces you should be thinking around funding and strategy and financing to scale up into a really successful studio. So in terms of what matters to grow and build a successful studio, I mean, it goes without saying you need a great game, an awesome team, and a shared vision. I don't have a creative bone in my body, but I recognize that there are a lot of you out there that have all of these qualities. And what we're aiming to do in this presentation is just show you the things that you need outside of that to build the infrastructure for your business that you need to become a successful studio. And those things are: how do you fund the journey? How do you hire the right people? And how do you set the right roadmap of targets and milestones to hit to get you there? So what matters to the future of your studio? I mean, it's a given that it's a game and the team that builds it and the creative input into that process. But you'll also need certain things, even from a very early stage, that will set you up for success. One of those things is a business plan. You'll also need a hiring plan. You'll need a detailed financial model to show potential funders and investors, and that model would dictate how much funding you need to get to where you want to go to. And then you'll need to set targets and milestones, and then have the right partners around you, either accountants or lawyers, who are trusted partners who are crucial to what you do. Before we move into the next piece of the presentation, I think it's just worth breaking down the life cycle of a game or in a game studio into two distinct pieces, because it will help map out what type of funding is right for you at which stage. So on the left-hand side of this graph, we're looking at a very early stage studio that has an idea, is developing a game, and is starting to test that game. They need a certain type of investment that is relatively risky to build the team, to build the game. And then on the right-hand side, this is more a game that is ready for launch, that is live, that is generating revenues, requires funding to maintain the operations of the business and to spend money on UA or marketing. Both of those two different types of phases need different types of capital, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. So going back to the very beginning of the journey, outside of the game you want to make, the team you want to do it with, you will need a business plan. Typically, this is could be a 10 to 15 page document that maps out the plan and the vision and the targets. It's where you put pen to paper and commit to the game you're going to be making, how you're going to get there, are there any competition, are there any competitors to be worried about, and how long it's going to take to build it and when you're going to launch the game. The person who's going to be reading this business plan, whether it's a bank or a VC fund or whether it's Sugar or somebody else, wants to know that you have a plan to get from A to B, that you know what it takes to scale your game with UA or marketing plans, that you have the right idea of who you need to hire, and what are the financial forecasts and the funding strategy for getting there. And then the final piece they'll need to see is an exit plan. Most investors, especially at an early stage, will want to know that they're giving you a certain amount of money and they will see a return on that. And typically that is an exit plan, which just means that maybe your business is acquired or there is an exit strategy which crystallizes some value for the early stage investors. This could take the form of a Word doc or a Google doc. You probably need a week to do the first draft. It's going to need a lot of iterations. Definitely ask advisors for help and feedback and pointers. And keep it updated. Nothing will ever go to plan. So make sure you always have a plan B. Be flexible about your strategy, and just keep challenging yourself to think about what you could do differently or better. In terms of targets and milestones, make sure you've thought about them. Think about it on a 3 to 5 year view. Think about what you want to do quarter by quarter or year by year. And think about not only what are your financial targets, but what are your operational targets. So for instance, they could be things like fundraising stages, or when you begin testing a certain piece of your game, or you launch the game, or you hire more resource to suddenly develop at a much quicker speed, or you work on game 2 or game 3 or a different iteration of what you want to do. These are all the things that show A, that you've thought strategically about your business, but B, when you're speaking to a financer, especially an equity investor, they can see that there's longevity in this business. The other thing you'll need to do is build a financial model. That could be an Excel model or it could be a Google Doc, Google Sheets. It doesn't really matter. But it needs to map out a monthly and annual plan for your business, and it needs to fit with what you've been talking about in your business plan. And this is the way you work out your revenue projections, what it's going to cost to get the game live and to hit those revenue projections, and what is going to be the cash you're going to need to fund the business. So I've taken a very simple example here of a mobile game, and I've only looked at 8 months worth of projections, but I've looked at revenues, costs, and therefore the cash burn of the business. I've assumed that a lot of cost goes into the business early on, almost £45,000 a month, and then through time, as revenues increase, so does the amount of cost going into the business, primarily because of user acquisition spend. But actually, as you'll see on the bottom right, that's when the business goes from loss making to profit making. Now, no businesses ever go to plan, so whatever financial model you put in place, it's going to change. But to have a good starting point, I think, is really what you need to have from a discipline point of view, and what an investor is going to want to see as well. In terms of funding options, there are a few open to you. You could bootstrap, which basically means you fund it yourself. You're either going to have a separate job on the side, or you're going to be using your savings. This is pretty intense to do it this way, but often it can be quite good as you're doing the very early stages of the business and you're de-risking the project. There are also grants that are available to you, potentially the UK Games Fund, which is a great initiative, so that's worth looking at. And then there's video games tax relief. So video games tax relief, as Shipley's would have mentioned to you, is whereby you spend a certain amount of money on developing a game and the government rebates you 20% of that spend. They're trying to incentivize game production and studios to grow. You can't do that immediately. You can't front load that refund. You need to be spending and developing for a year or two before you get a significant rebate. But ultimately, it should be factored into your projections because it can be super useful. Then there's raising equity, which I'll come on to in the next slide, but this could be angel investors, so individuals who like to invest in startups or interesting ventures, VC funds who are professional investors who have a portfolio of companies they invest in. They have huge amounts of expertise, So they don't only invest and give you their money, they bring their network and their expertise and their know-how. So it can be very valuable to your business. And then there's friends and family who want to back you. Typically their check sizes are a little bit smaller, but it's an easier way to raise money and a good way to get off the ground. Then you can take on loans either from banks or specialists such as Sugar. Again, I'll come to that a little bit later to talk about the differences. Or you could crowdfund or do a Kickstarter campaign where you're going out to the general public effectively through those channels, and you're asking them to back your business. They can be quite tough to predict whether they're actually going to work. They can be quite cumbersome and take quite a long time to do. But on Kickstarter, for instance, you can get a good amount of money just to get you off the ground. It might not be enough to fund your business for a year or so, but it'll be enough to get a project done. Moving on to the equity piece, the definition of equity effectively is an investment into your studio in exchange for shares. So a studio will give you, for instance, an investor will give you £100,000 in exchange for 10% of your business. And that means that they effectively own a stake in your company, which they hope will be worth a lot of money one day. An equity investor is typically looking to make 10, actually even 20 times their investment. And they need to be excited about a big exit. They need to believe your game is going to take off, that it'll generate a lot of revenues, and that one day the business will either IPO or it will be bought by another company for a lot of money. Typically rounds are 20% of the company in terms of how much equity is given away to external investors. That can end up being quite expensive if you're giving away 20% each time, which is why you need a mix of debt and equity in the business. Some of the key terms that you need to look out for are SEIS and EIS, which are government schemes which incentivizes angel investments. It effectively means that for every 100,000 that a company invests, that a person invests in your company, they get a rebate from the government, which is a great incentive. Seed and Series A are rounds, equity rounds that you need to be aware of if you've got VC investors. Those are terms you don't need to worry about right now. Similarly, ordinary and preferred shares, they are different types of share class that different funds will ask for. Again, I'm jumping 20 steps ahead, but those are things you need to think about. Debt funding is a different type of investment. Effectively, it's a loan. It's money that is borrowed that has to be paid back. Now, typically, those lenders can include banks, individuals, funds, or specialists such as Sugar. And the reason this is a good way to finance your business is when you are live and you are generating revenues, when you need access to those revenues and the payback and the visibility on what is being funded there is really short, it makes much more sense to finance using loans than it does to give away equity in your business. Just referring back to the previous slide, you are giving away a chunk of your business forever in exchange for the investment from those equity investors. Whereas if you take a loan, you're going to be paying that back after a few months, and the cost of that relative to giving away a chunk of your business is much lower. Now, there are very different interest rates depending on who you go with, plus different onboarding processes. I would argue that banks or funds don't really understand the game space, and therefore you're going to struggle to get a loan from them. But you should always take a look at the different terms and different conditions. The advantage, as I mentioned, is you give no equity away in your business. You retain ownership, and you get the right kind of funding at the right time. This is perfect for funding short-term projects, whether that's UA, where the payback period on that spend is very short. That means for every dollar you spend, you probably expect to get that money back within 6 to 9 months. That is a relatively short-term payback period and should be debt funded. You don't want to be giving away equity in your business. And then similarly, getting hold of your revenue early or VGTR refunds, something that we specialize in at Sugar, those should be debt funded and not equity funded. Finally, I just wanted to touch on 5 things that you may not have thought of. Obviously, I'm going to mention VGTR because it's free money almost, and it's something you would not believe how many studios don't make the most of it. Looking at recent data, under 20% of studios in the UK claim VGTR relief, which is really leaving a lot of money on the table. The government has put in place an amazing scheme, and it's worth looking into. Second thing is digital store payment terms. You probably wouldn't know immediately that Apple and Google and PlayStation and Facebook don't pay you immediately. So for instance, in August, if you generated £10,000 of revenues on Apple, you would not receive that money until the 1st of October. Sometimes PlayStation has got payment terms that last 3 to 4 months. So you need to build that into your cash flow forecast because it's going to impact your funding once you're live. The third thing is workplace pensions. that is worth doing some work around. For every full-time employee you employ, not only do you pay their salary, but you have to pay pensions as well. Different size companies and different salaries require different levels of pensions, but it will be an extra cost that you may not have thought about. Fourthly, legal fees, and fifth point is an accountant. They're pretty similar points, but you need to have the right partners to back you. You need to have the expertise in each of those fields. It will make your life a nightmare if you don't have the right people backing you. And finally, the most important thing I would say is make sure you ask for help. The best thing that I've ever done in my businesses, or other studios have ever done, is they have the right advisors who they can talk to and get feedback on. So it doesn't matter what business plan it is, what the model looks like, what the investor deck looks like, what game it is. Always get feedback and advice, and people are always willing to help. So just to finish up, you will need to plan ahead. Obviously the game you're building is super important, as are the milestones around that, but you will need a business plan, a financial model, and therefore a funding plan, and make sure to have the right balance between debt and equity. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have a mix of both. Equity is more suited to the earlier stage when you are developing a game, but debt and loans is much better for you in terms of the cost of it, but also in terms of the projects that you're funding once you've got a live game. And then finally, don't scrimp on your partners. Make sure you have the best lawyers and accountants around. So that's it from us. Please visit our website or follow us on Twitter, or drop us an email. We'd love to chat. We love looking at business plans and models and fundraising strategies. It's in our DNA. So we're happy to give you feedback. We're happy to talk about it. And if you need quick and easy funding to grow your game, then please drop us a line. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the event.